She never expected the silence to echo louder than your words. But here you are, not angry, not bitter, just gone and unforgettable. Now she remembers the man who stopped remembering her, the man who chose his peace over her presence. And it's that calm, that quiet strength that now haunts her thoughts in this video. We're going to unpack why your absence says more than your presence ever could, and why walking away wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. If you're ready to understand the power of letting go, you're in the right place. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Let's get into it. Number 1. The shift she never expected. At first, she didn't notice. The shift she never expected thought your silence was temporary, but then it lasted. You didn't announce it, you didn't make a scene, you simply stopped chasing. And that's where everything shifted. Stoic men don't perform breakups. They detach quietly, respectfully, powerfully. And that calm departure, it pierced deeper than any dramatic goodbye ever could, because while she was out there believing you'd wait, believing she could always come back to the version of you that once begged for her time, you were evolving. You were no longer the man who needed her to feel whole. You became the man who found peace in his own company. And ironically, the moment you forgot her is when she finally remembered you. She remembered your consistency, the way you showed up, the way you cared. Not in grand gestures, but in steady presence. She remembered how you listened more than you spoke, how your energy calmed hers, but back then she wasn't ready. Maybe she thought someone else would excite her more. Maybe she thought you'd always be there as her emotional safety net. But here's the truth. When a man embraces stoic detachment, he becomes unforgettable. Not because he tries to be, but because his absence becomes a mirror. She now looks into that mirror and sees what she lost. Not just a man, but a presence. A grounded, centered force that didn't crumble when ignored. A man who didn't beg, didn't lash out, didn't spiral. He simply walked away, not from her, but toward himself. That's what Stoicism teaches us. As Epictetus once said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And your reaction wasn't desperation, it was dignity. You didn't shut the door with anger. You left it open with silence, and that silence now echoes in her mind louder than any words ever could. So if you're wondering why she's thinking of you now, why memories suddenly flood back, it's because she feels the weight of your absence. The emotional safety you once provided is no longer available. You're not bitter. You're just done. And nothing is more attractive, more haunting, more powerful than a man who once gave deeply and then let go without turning cold. That's the shift she never expected. That's the man she remembers. Not because you begged to stay, but because you had the strength to walk away with piece number 2 when your absence becomes the loudest voice. When your absence becomes the loudest voice, funny, how silence can speak louder than words. You didn't text. You didn't check in. You just vanished. Not out of malice, but out of self-respect. She expected noise, you gave her stillness. And in that stillness, your value grew. A stoic man doesn't chase closure. He becomes it. And now she remembers the man who forgot her. She remembers how you used to care. How your presence used to be consistent. How your energy once filled the gaps her attention left behind. But the shift happened quietly. No announcements, no ultimatums. You simply stopped feeding a connection that was starving you. That's what shook her. Not rage, not resentment, but the sudden absence of your warmth. You see, men who live by stoic principles don't retaliate. They don't throw emotional punches or cling to what slips away. They reflect, accept and release. You didn't disappear to punish her. You withdrew because begging for space in someone's life contradicts the very essence of self-respect. And while she may not have seen it, then she feels it. Now, think of Marcus Aurelius. He wrote that The best revenge is to be unlike him who caused the injury. In your case, the best response wasn't to prove your worth, but to forget the need to prove anything at all. That's what flipped the script. You didn't become colder. You became clearer. You stopped showing up where you weren't being met halfway. You didn't ask her to change. You let your silence show her who you became. And here's the twist: when a man pulls back with quiet conviction, not spite, it leaves a mark. Not the kind that hurts, but the kind that haunts. Because now, in the quiet moments she used to ignore, she hears the echo of your absence. She scrolls back through old messages. Not because she's nostalgic, but because she's realizing something. You were the one who truly cared. But now you're not chasing, you're not checking. You've moved on. Not with bitterness, but with peace. That's the paradox. The moment you forget her for real is the moment she finally remembers everything. And that's where the story shifts from noise to memory, from presence to impact. Your silence didn't end the connection. It revealed the truth behind it. And that truth. It's what lingers now. If this resonates with you, take a moment to like the video. It really helps the message reach more men who need to hear it. Drop a comment below sharing your experience, or simply type, "I let go and found myself." Let's keep going, because this story isn't over. Yet, number 3. She feels the weight of. She feels the weight of what you no longer carry, what you no longer carry. You carried the relationship, you carried the overthinking, you carried the hope, until one day you didn't, you dropped the weight. Not because you were weak, but because you were wise. As Seneca once said, sometimes even to live is an act of courage. And walking away with your peace, that was your act of strength. She notices it now. The silence, the space, the absence of those long messages, the check-ins, the emotional labour you once poured into holding everything together. At first, she may have felt relief, like the tension finally left the room. But what she didn't expect was the echo that followed, an emptiness that slowly reminded her of everything you used to carry for the both of you. And now that it's gone, she realizes how heavy it truly was. Not just the relationship, but your presence, your loyalty, your effort. Things she mistook as permanent until you quietly put them down and walked away. See, Stoicism doesn't teach us to be cold. It teaches us to be clear, to recognize when something is draining us more than it's serving us. And that's exactly what you did. You didn't leave with anger. You didn't storm out looking for attention. You simply stopped carrying what wasn't meant to be carried alone. Maybe she scrolls through old messages now. Maybe she replays moments where you showed up more than she ever acknowledged. It's funny how memory sharpens when the energy is no longer available. When you stopped making her your emotional priority, she finally felt the cost of losing a man who once gave her his peace, his patience, his presence. That man, the one she now remembers, is the one who finally remembered himself. So if you're watching this and wondering if she notices what you stopped doing, she does, maybe not with words, but with subtle pauses, with a glance at her phone, with a growing sense that something stable, something rare has slipped away. That's the power of a man who forgets her, not out of bitterness, but out of balance, who finally chooses himself not to punish her, but to protect his soul. She feels the weight now, the weight of what you no longer carry, and that weight, it's shaping a memory. She never thought she'd revisit the memory of the man who once held everything and then chose to let go. Number 4, the moment she questions her. The moment she questions her choices. Choices, it always comes late, but it comes that quiet evening when she scrolls through old messages, wondering what happened to the man who used to care so much. She's not just missing your attention, she's questioning her decision. Because when you stopped fighting for her, you started standing for yourself. You see, in the beginning, she believed your presence was permanent, that no matter how distant she became, no matter how many silent treatments or mixed signals she threw your way, you would stay. You had a heart that kept trying. You forgave quickly. You explained yourself. You overextended. You made her feel safe even when she made you feel uncertain, and she got used to it. But there's a quiet power in a man who no longer chases what he once begged to hold on to. When you step back, not with anger, but with acceptance, you change the entire emotional equation. You stopped offering your energy where it wasn't appreciated. You didn't slam the door. You simply stopped knocking, and now she's the one pacing behind that door. She remembers the warmth you once gave so freely, the messages that once lit up her phone, the steady hand you offered when she was unsure. But what she didn't realise, what she realises now, is that even a good man walks away when peace costs too much. That's what Stoicism teaches us, to value our inner calm over outer chaos. Like Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realise that your mind is complicit in the provocation. You chose to no longer be complicit. You chose peace. And now she feels the shift. She remembers the man who forgot her. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect, that version of you. The man who no longer needs her validation to feel whole is the one that haunts her most, because you didn't move on in bitterness. You moved on in balance. And that's what makes her question everything. So if you're watching this, wondering if she thinks about you, trust me, she does not with pride, but with pause and maybe even a little regret. Because once you stopped chasing her, you became the one she started chasing in her mind. Let her. Sit with that number 5. Stillness rewrote. Your stillness rewrote your worth. You didn't post a cryptic message hoping she'd notice. You didn't craft a final paragraph to explain your heart. You didn't ask her to understand your silence. You just embraced it. You became still, and that stillness wasn't weakness. It wasn't giving up. It was the start of a different kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be powerful. And in that stillness, something shifted quietly without announcements or applause. You stopped being the man she left behind and became the man she can't stop remembering why. Because in the beginning, she expected noise. She expected you to react to chase to prove that she still held a grip on your heart. But when you didn't play that role, when you chose peace over pursuit, you rewrote the story, not just for her, but for yourself. That's the Stoic way. Choosing stillness not to escape, but to return to who you are beneath the noise, beneath the wounds, beneath the urge to explain. She's scrolling through memories now, old photos, messages you once sent with open sincerity. She's wondering how the man who used to show up so consistently could now be so silent, so detached. What she doesn't realise is that the silence wasn't sudden. It was built moment by moment through disappointments, through being misunderstood, through giving more than you ever received. And finally, you made a quiet decision not to punish her, but to protect yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the colour of its thoughts, and over time, your thoughts shifted from how do I win her back to how do I return to myself." That's what changed everything, because the man she remembers now isn't the one who was begging to be seen. It's the man who vanished, not in bitterness, but in calm, in clarity, in composure. She may not say it out loud, but she feels it, the weight of what you no longer carry, the absence that speaks louder than words. The transformation that happened not with noise, but with stillness. And now she remembers you. Not as the man who once tried too hard, but as the man who no longer needed to try at all. A man who chose dignity over desperation. Silence over seeking presence, over proving that's the man who's hard to forget. Take a moment and let that sink in. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Your silence didn't come from weakness. It came from wisdom. And that wisdom echoes louder than any explanation ever could if this message spoke to something deep within you. I invite you to pause and reflect. What moment made you choose peace over pursuit? Share it in the comments below, or simply write, "I return to myself, I read everyone." Now let's keep going, because your growth is just getting started. Number 6. Her curiosity becomes her regret. Her regret. At first, she wondered what you were doing then. She wondered why you didn't care. Then it hit her. You changed. You became someone she no longer recognized but deeply remembered. Not the clingy version, not the chasing version, but the evolved version. The version that chose growth over grief and that shift. It shook her more than any angry message ever could you see. When a man pulls back with intention, not to play games, but to protect his peace, he begins a quiet transformation. You stopped showing up in her notifications, but started showing up in her mind. She didn't expect that. She thought you'd wait, thought you'd linger in the background like you always did, but this time you didn't. You chose stillness. You chose to redirect your energy inward, and that simple choice became your loudest message. Stoicism teaches us not to suppress emotion, but to master it. And that's exactly what you did. You didn't beg for clarity, you created it within yourself. You didn't demand closure. You became it. That's the part she can't stop thinking about. Not because you forced her to see your worth, but because you stopped forcing anything at all. You became the man who didn't just move on, you Rose. Maybe she scrolls through your old photos now, wondering how you made peace with the silence. Maybe she replays the last conversation looking for signs that you were slipping away. But the truth is, you didn't slip. You elevated quietly, calmly, powerfully. And now, in the stillness you left behind, her curiosity turned into a regret she never saw coming. So if you're in that place right now, if you're choosing growth over chasing, know this. The world has a way of remembering the man who forgets the version of himself that begged to be loved. That's what Stoic men do. They don't cling, they don't collapse, they become number 7. She realizes you needed nothing from her. You used to. She realizes you needed nothing from her. Reach out, hoping for a response. You used to explain, hoping for understanding. Now you need nothing, and that is what unsettles her, because a man who no longer seeks validation becomes unforgettable. That's the kind of quiet independence Stoicism teaches needing. Nothing attracting everything. And here's the truth. She never expected you to stop needing her. She thought the cycle would continue, you reaching out her, deciding when to respond, but something changed. You stopped playing the emotional tugafuer. You stopped trying to be chosen and chose yourself. Instead, that subtle shift, that silent exit from the emotional battlefield caught her off guard. She didn't lose a man who was desperate. She lost a man who became disciplined. At one point, you might have stayed up at night wondering if you should send that message. Maybe you rewrote it a few times, trying to say the right thing. Maybe you replayed past conversations in your head, trying to figure out what went wrong, but not anymore. Now you sleep peacefully. Now your silence is intentional, not emotional withdrawal, but emotional mastery. That's the Stoic way, not coldness, but clarity. You stopped trying to control outcomes and focused on what you could control, your peace, your energy, your direction. And ironically, that's when she started remembering you, not as the man who was always available, but as the man who became unavailable, not out of pettiness, but out of power. A man who walks with purpose, who doesn't cling, who lets go with grace. That man stands out in a world full of noise and neediness. His quiet presence lingers longer than 1,000 words. And now she remembers the man who forgot her. Not because he wanted revenge, but because he wanted peace. So if you're watching this and you're in that space where you've stopped explaining, stopped chasing, stay there. You're not being distant, you're being deliberate. And the man who needs nothing, he ends up being the one they never forget. Let that truth settle in for a moment, because choosing yourself fully, silently, without seeking applause, isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's what marks the shift from emotional dependence to emotional freedom. So I want to hear from you. What moment made you realize you no longer needed validation to feel valuable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, or simply type, "I need nothing. I attract everything." This journey isn't about proving your worth. It's about remembering it. Let's keep going. Number 8, when you no longer. When you no longer react, she remembers react. She remembers no more arguments, no more replies, no more chasing after her energy. You stopped reacting. You didn't slam the door. You simply stopped knocking. And that lack of reaction, it forced her to sit with her own choices. Because when a stoic man pulls back, he doesn't punish. He preserves. Your silence wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about playing games or trying to make her miss you. It was about self-respect. You got tired of handing your peace over to someone who didn't value it, so you chose to keep it for yourself. And in doing so, you stopped being the man she expected, the one who always had something to say, always tried to fix things, always hoped you became the man she didn't know how to read anymore. And that's when she started remembering, not just remembering you, but the version of you that quietly held it together, while she pulled away the version who gave chances, who offered grace, but who ultimately chose clarity over chaos. She remembers now because your silence made space for her reflection when you stopped reacting. She was left alone with her own echo. And often that echo sounds a lot like regret. That's the power of Stoicism in love. It teaches you that not everything deserves your energy, that peace is more valuable than proving a point. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. And you live that you let go. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about you." Maybe now she checks your profile more often. Maybe now she brings up your name in passing. Maybe now she wonders how someone who once showed so much emotion can now show none at all. But that's what happens when a man evolves. You didn't forget her to make a statement. You forgot her because you remembered yourself. And that right there is when she finally remembers the man who no longer reacts. The man who stopped knocking the man she never expected to become unforgettable, simply by walking away in silence. Number 9. You became the story she can't rewrite. You became the story she can't rewrite. She can rewrite the past with others, but not with you, because you didn't end it with drama. You ended it with direction. And that kind of exit rooted in clarity. Not chaos is hard to forget. You became the chapter that lingers, the one that left a mark, not a mess. Here's the thing. People rewrite the past when it's messy, when it's loud, when there's blame to pass around and emotions to justify. But what happens when a man leaves with silence, when he doesn't fight, doesn't plead, doesn't throw one last emotional punch? He becomes the kind of memory you can't edit. She can try to tell herself it didn't matter that you were cold, that you didn't care. But deep down, she knows it wasn't detachment. It was dignity. You didn't storm out. You didn't beg her to stay. You simply stopped showing up where you were no longer seen. And that's what haunts her, because your goodbye didn't come with fireworks. It came with peace. And peace doesn't give her a reason to demonize you. It gives her space to reflect. And when reflection meets regret, that's when the real remembering begins. Stoicism teaches that we cannot control others. We can only control ourselves, and that's exactly what you did. You didn't lose your temper. You didn't try to prove your value. You just embodied it. You walked away with the same strength you brought into the relationship. That's rare, and rare things are not forgotten. They're remembered more intensely with time. She remembers now, not just the man who once cared, but the man who stopped the man who gave her the calm she took for granted. The man who didn't compete, didn't retaliate, didn't collapse under the weight of rejection. You didn't become her lesson in pain. You became her lesson in presence, and in your absence, that lesson keeps echoing. You see, you became the story she tells herself late at night. Not to feel loved, but to feel the loss. Not because you broke her, but because you didn't break yourself to keep her. That's the part she can't revise. That's the paragraph in her past she skips over, but always comes back to, because no matter how she tries to frame it, you were the man who walked away. Not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. And wisdom lingers longer than any argument ever could number. 10 Peace made you. Peace made you powerful. powerful, you chose peace over proving a point, and in doing so, you became powerful because peace isn't passive. It's disciplined, it's focused, it's earned. The Stoics weren't loud, they were unshakable. And now, so are you. Your peace became the very thing that made her remember. She thought you'd fight. She thought you'd argue. She thought you'd try to convince her of your worth just like you used to. But instead, you did the unexpected. You gave her nothing to push against. No resistance. No drama. Just space. And that silence wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. Because when a man stops trying to be heard and simply walks in truth, people start listening differently. That's what you did. You stopped chasing explanations and you started embodying presence. Think about it. Most people crumble in silence. They panic. They reach out. They try to fill the gap, but not you. You held your ground. You let go with grace. And that made you rare. Because real peace doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from accepting what you can't control and choosing not to lose yourself in the process. That's Stoicism in action. That's what Marcus Aurelius meant when he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And now she remembers you, not because you shouted to be seen, but because you became unbothered by being unseen. She remembers the man who stopped performing, who stopped proving, who quietly let go without bitterness. She remembers the moment she could no longer read your energy because it no longer revolved around her, that shift. That's what lingers. Maybe it hit her in the middle of a quiet night scrolling through old messages, or maybe it crept in while she was with someone else, realizing that no one else gives her that calm, that grounding, that clarity you used to offer. You became the mirror she now misses. Not because you reflected her desires, but because you reflected something she couldn't replace: inner stillness, true direction, and masculine peace. So if you're still wondering whether your quiet strength mattered, trust me, it did. You didn't just walk away. You elevated, and in that elevation you became unforgettable. She may have forgotten you when you were chasing, but now that you've forgotten her, now that you've found peace, she remembers, and not just as a memory, but as a man. She underestimated number 11. The man who forgot her finally became the man who forgot her, finally became himself. She remembers you. Now, not because you fought to be remembered, but because you stopped fighting altogether. You forgot her, not in bitterness, but in healing. You didn't forget to punish you, forgot to protect your peace, and in doing so, you became who you were always meant to be. A man rooted, a man whole, a stoic, not in theory but in presence. Let's talk about what that really means, because forgetting someone who once mattered deeply isn't about erasing them. It's about remembering yourself. It's about no longer carrying a version of you that was dependent on their affection. At one point, you were checking your phone every hour, thinking of the right words to make her stay, to explain yourself better, to fix something. You didn't break alone, but the day you stopped trying to solve the puzzle of someone else's emotions, that was the day you started solving your own. And that's when the shift happened, quietly, gradually, but deeply. You stopped living in reaction. You stopped bending to be chosen. And instead of reaching out, you reached inward. That's what Marcus Aurelius meant when he said, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say or think or do, only what you do." That's the Stoic path, not coldness, but clarity, not detachment out of pride, but detachment out of purpose. She didn't expect it. She thought your silence was just another strategy, a pause before your return, but it wasn't. It was real, it was earned. You weren't waiting on her anymore. You were waking up early, hitting the gym, reading again. You started laughing with friends, not out of distraction, but because life started tasting good again. You didn't disappear from her world, you reappeared in your own. And now, when she thinks of you, there's no version of you that's begging or broken. There's just the memory of a man who used to chase, and then one day stopped, a man who outgrew the storm. Instead of waiting for the weather to change, she remembers you now because you forgot her, and in doing so, finally remembered yourself. She conclusion remembers the man who forgot her, not because he yelled, begged, or chased, but because he chose himself. And that choice, that quiet, powerful decision, left a permanent imprint. If this message resonated with you, let it be a reminder. You don't need to be remembered by force. You become unforgettable by being whole. Thanks for watching. If you found value in this video, give it a like to support the channel. Leave a comment below and let me know which part hit the hardest for you, or just type, "She remembers my piece." And if you're ready for more content like this, don't forget to check out the recommended videos on screen. Stay grounded, stay stoic, and keep walking forward.